Imagine a Pacific nation, a vibrant democracy, suddenly thrust into an emergency election.
Yeah, its government dissolved almost a year early.
It's not just a political reshuffle. It feels more like the latest tremor from a political earthquake that's really redefined power, trust, and maybe even the rule of law in Samoa.
Absolutely.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a really comprehensive plunge into the, let's say, complex and volatile landscape of Samoa's upcoming August 2025 general election.
It's a critical moment for the country.
This deep dive is designed to cut through the noise, basically giving you a shortcut to being truly well-informed. We've sifted through, well, a stack of sources, local news reports, political analyses, international commentaries.
All the relevant stuff.
Exactly. All to bring you the essential nuggets of knowledge. We'll unpack why this snap election was triggered, who the key players are in this unprecedented three-way contest.
Right, it used to be simple.
It did. And we'll look at the critical issues at stake and also the significant procedural challenges that could fundamentally shape the outcome. And really, Samoa's democratic future.
There are big questions there.
Our mission is to help you grasp not just the what, but maybe the surprising why behind the headlines. We want to offer crucial insights into what this moment means, perhaps, for democratic processes in small island nations more broadly.
Yeah, there are definitely wider implications.
You might be hearing snippets about Samoa's upcoming election, but what does it really mean? What truly led to this moment? And what are the perhaps surprising implications?
Well, what's truly fascinating here, and I think often overlooked in quick summaries, is how profoundly the personal and political narratives have intertwined in Samoa.
Okay.
This isn't just a dry policy debate. It's, you could say, a high-stakes drama rooted in deep relationships, past allegiances, and fundamental disagreements over governance itself. Understanding this intricate web is, I think, key to grasping the larger picture. The fragility of democratic stability, particularly in small island nations, and how these internal fissures can lead to national crises that, well, resonate far beyond their borders. We'll explore how these dynamics are playing out and what they signify for the future of Samoan governance.
Absolutely. So let's start right at the beginning. Let's try and unpick the genesis of this crisis. Why is Samoa even holding a snap election on August 29th, 2025?
Yeah, good place to start.
Because this isn't like a scheduled quadrennial event. It's a direct, immediate consequence of an unprecedented political crisis, one that led to the dissolution of the 17th Parliament nearly a year ahead of schedule.
Right. And to truly appreciate the gravity of this snap election, we really need to recall the recent past.
Okay.
The current ruling party, the Fatua Samoa Tasi, or FAST.
FAST, yeah.
They came to power in 2021, and this was genuinely a monumental shift. It marked the end of nearly 4 decades of uninterrupted rule by the Human Rights Protection Party, HRPP.
That's an incredible run.
It is. And that transition itself, remember, was fraught with a months-long constitutional crisis.
Oh, yes, I remember that.
But it was ultimately hailed by many as, well, a triumph for constitutional principles, a testament to Samoa's vibrant, sometimes turbulent democracy.
Right.
It really signaled a profound public desire for change, and I think a renewed emphasis on the rule of law after, concerns over HRPP's lengthy dominance.
And this is where the narrative takes such a surprising turn, isn't it?
It really does.
The very party that campaigned on change, on anti-corruption, on upholding the rule of law, the FAST Party experienced its own, well, internal implosion.
Yes, spectacular collapse almost.
How did a ruling government which swept into power with such a clear mandate seeming so robust just a few years ago suddenly just shatter from within? It's a compelling story, really, of internal power struggles that just became unsustainable.
Indeed. The unraveling began pretty dramatically back in January 2025. There was this profound schism right at the very heart of the FAST Party.
Right at the top.
Right at the top. It saw the Prime Minister, who, as you know, made history as Samoa's first female head of government.
Yeah, huge moment.
Pitted directly against her then Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries. And he wasn't just any minister. He also held the incredibly influential position of chairman of the FAST Party.
Okay, so a major figure within the party structure.
A very major figure. And this wasn't just, a policy disagreement. It escalated into a direct, very public confrontation that really shook the party to its absolute core.
And the specific actions that fueled this conflict, they were pretty stark.
They were.
The Prime Minister took the decisive step of dismissing her minister. This was after the Samoa Police Service filed a series of serious criminal charges against him.
Right, serious charges.
Allegations including conspiracy, fabricating evidence, defamation, serious stuff.
Very serious.
And the Prime Minister's rationale for this dismissal was, well, pretty unambiguous. It was presented as a critical move to uphold ministerial integrity. And more broadly, that fundamental principle of equality under the law, which ironically was a cornerstone of FAST's original campaign against the HRPP government.
Exactly, the perceived excesses of the past.
She was really making a stand that no one, regardless of their political position, was above the law.
And what's particularly revealing about this conflict is the immediate and forceful counter-move by the minister's faction within the party.
They didn't just accept it?
Oh, no. They didn't simply accept the dismissal.
Yeah.
Instead, they retaliated swiftly. They initiated proceedings to expel the prime minister herself, along with 4 of her loyal cabinet ministers, from the FAST party.
Wow.
Their clear objective here was to trigger Samoa's anti-defection laws.
Ah, right. Those laws.
Under those laws, an MP who resigns or is expelled by the party they represented at election time must vacate their parliamentary seat.
So this would have effectively dismantled the government.
Exactly. Dismantled it from within. The PM and her loyalists would lose their seats, trigger by-elections, potentially shift the whole balance of power.
That's high-stakes political maneuvering.
Absolutely. And this incident, it really raises a critical question about the dynamics within political parties, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How does a party balance that need for internal discipline and cohesion with the foundational principle of the rule of law? Especially when its own high-ranking members face serious criminal allegations. It tested the very fabric of their political structure.
And the limits of party power.
Precisely.
And this is where a really crucial intervention occurred, right? One that maybe temporarily halted the collapse, but, well, ultimately just prolonged the political drama.
That's right. The Speaker of the House made a decisive ruling regarding this attempt to expel the Prime Minister and her ministers.
Okay, what did the Speaker say?
Despite the faction's efforts to use party expulsion to force them out of their seats, the Speaker stated unequivocally that neither he nor Parliament had the authority, at that stage anyway, to make a decision that would result in those seats being vacated.
So basically, internal party politics doesn't automatically override parliamentary status.
Exactly. He emphasized the paramount importance of legal due process, asserting that such matters have to align with the rule of law and existing legal frameworks, not just internal party maneuvers.
That intervention sounds absolutely pivotal.
It was pivotal in preventing an immediate, perhaps chaotic, collapse of the government. By prioritizing legal due process, affirming that seats couldn't be vacated just on internal party expulsions, the Speaker ensured the embattled administration could, well, precariously, cling to power.
Cling on, yeah.
It reinforced the supremacy of legal principles over partisan machinations. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, governance in small democracies. The Speaker's role here really highlights the critical importance of independent parliamentary oversight and the affirmation of due process. These can act as a crucial bulwark against political instability, even attempts to subvert democratic norms through internal party mechanisms.
It bought the government time, basically.
It bought time, but the underlying tensions, they remained completely unresolved.
So following that ruling, Samoa entered this period of, well, profound and sustained political instability.
Deep instability, yeah.
The Prime Minister's minority government, though hanging by a thread, showed remarkable tenacity. It managed to survive 2 votes of no confidence in Parliament.
Right, one on February 25th and another on March 6th, 2025.
Those must have been incredibly tight votes, underscoring just how fragile that grip on power was.
Indeed. And during this period, the political atmosphere, both in Parliament and beyond, was widely described by observers as, well, nothing short of toxic.
Toxic? That's a strong word.
It was characterized by a rapid succession of kind of tit-for-tat removals of ministers and associate ministers as each faction just sought to assert dominance.
Right.
And beyond the parliamentary chambers, the conflict spilled over. Intense social media harassment campaigns targeting political figures.
Oh, dear.
And alarmingly, even worrying attacks on press freedom. As these 2 factions within what was once the ruling party vied intensely for control, the public discourse just became increasingly polarized, acrimonious.
Creating a deeply unsettling environment.
Or governance for public life, absolutely.
And then came the final decisive blow.
The breaking point.
In late May 2025, in what seems like a clearly calculated, coordinated strategic move,
It looks that way.
the official opposition, the Human Rights Protection Party, HRPP,
The former long-ruling party.
they joined forces with the minister's faction of the ruling Fast Party, and together they voted against the government's proposed 2025-26 national budget.
And the budget was defeated by a pretty significant margin. 34 votes against, only 16 for, with 2 abstentions.
That's a big defeat.
It is. And this is a critical point that really cannot be overstated in the context of a Westminster-style government, which Samoa operates under.
Right. The budget is everything.
Failing to pass a supply bill, which is essentially the government's authority to spend public funds, represents a fundamental and existential defeat for any administration.
No budget, no power to govern.
Precisely. Without a budget, the government is stripped of its legal authority to fund public services, pay salaries, execute any policies. It effectively paralyzes its ability to govern. It's the ultimate parliamentary weapon.
Exactly. So, faced with a completely paralyzed legislature, an ungovernable parliament, the prime minister ultimately had no viable alternative.
No room to move.
She advised the head of state to dissolve the 17th parliament and issue a writ for a snap general election.
And the head of state accepted that advice.
Parliament was formally dissolved on June 3rd, 2025, setting the immediate stage for this August 29th snap election.
Here we are.
So for you, the listener, what does this all mean? Well, it signifies that the very foundation of Samoa's governance was challenged and ultimately fractured, leading directly to this snap election.
Yeah.
It powerfully illustrates how parliamentary mechanics, something as fundamental as a budget vote, can be wielded as potent tools in political battles, forcing the hand of even a determined government and triggering, effectively, a constitutional reset.
A reset born out of crisis.
With the stage now unexpectedly set for this snap election, let's pivot our focus to the key players, because the political landscape has been fundamentally reshaped.
Completely reshaped.
That relatively neat two-party dynamic that emerged from 2021, gone. It's given way to a far more complex, unpredictable three-way contest.
Yeah, much messier.
And what's particularly compelling here is that former political allies now stand directly against each other.
Former colleagues, now rivals.
With the battle lines defined as much by shared personal histories, deep-seated loyalties, as by traditional policy differences.
It's very personal.
We're now looking at 3 distinct major blocks vying for control. You've got the HRPP, led by its long-serving former prime minister.
The old guard seeking a comeback.
Then the original Fast Party, now under the sole leadership of its founder.
The disruptor, now disrupted itself.
And the newly formed Samoa Uniting Party, or SUP, led by the caretaker prime minister.
The incumbent, but with a new banner.
Yeah.
It's truly a fascinating transformation of the political arena. Those allegiances that underpinned the last election profoundly fractured.
Shattered, yeah.
Creating a dynamic where the traditional distinctions between political friends and foes have become incredibly blurred. This isn't just about party platforms anymore.
No.
It's about trust, personal networks. Which leader can command the most enduring loyalty in what is a highly personalized political culture?
Right, that personal element seems key.
This contest is shaping up to be intensely personal, where every past connection, every perceived slight, every act of loyalty, it could all play a pivotal role in the final outcome.
It really is like witnessing a national-scale family feud, isn't it? With deep roots and profound implications.
That's a good way to put it.
For you, listening, this makes understanding the election far more compelling than just analyzing policy papers. It's about grasping this intricate weave of personal histories and loyalties, which, well, often dictates where real political power lies in Samoa.
Absolutely.
So let's begin with what we're calling the resurgent behemoth, the Human Rights Protection Party, HRPP.
The behemoth, yeah.
This party, under its formidable and long-serving former prime minister, enters the 2025 election as a wounded, yes, but undeniably powerful force.
Wounded but dangerous.
After that unprecedented run, nearly 4 decades, they were ousted in 2021 amidst that constitutional crisis.
A shock to their system.
As the official opposition, the HRPP has been a vigilant, relentless critic of the previous government, challenging them in parliament and notably in the courts, too.
They haven't been quiet.
With the dramatic implosion of the Fast government, the HRPP clearly perceives this as, well, a golden opportunity to reclaim its former dominance and get back into power.
They see their chance now.
Yeah.
And their campaign strategy for the snap election, it marks a significant and, I'd say, pragmatic pivot from their previous approaches.
How so?
They've consciously shifted away from those complex governance issues, the constitutional debates that arguably contributed to their 2021 defeat,
Yeah.
Centered on those controversial land and titles bills.
Right, that didn't play well for them, ultimately.
Instead, they are now waging a campaign squarely focused on economic populism, tangible, immediate benefits for the average voter.
Bread and butter issues.
Exactly. It's a classic political maneuver. Sidestep the abstract arguments, address the daily concerns.
And their flagship policy really exemplifies this strategic shift, doesn't it?
That absolutely does. It's a landmark $110 million cost of living adjustment, or KLA initiative.
PLA, okay.
They're branding this as a core component of their poverty alleviation project.
Sounds big.
This ambitious plan promises a direct annual payment of $500 tala to every resident Samoan citizen, regardless of age, regardless of income.
Wow, $500 for everyone.
For everyone. They actively highlight the immediate financial relief this would provide to families grappling with rising living costs, pointing out, for instance, that a household of 6 would get a substantial $3,000 tala annually.
That's a clear, simple message, easy to understand.
Very clear, very simple, very direct, designed to resonate with economic anxieties.
And this robust economic focus is strategically complemented, isn't it, by a narrative emphasizing their long legacy.
Yes, their legacy of experience and national development. They've been actively promoting their 40 years of achievements through various channels.
Showing off the infrastructure.
Showcasing a long and frankly undeniable list of infrastructure projects completed under their extensive tenure: roads, bridges, airports, hospitals.
Things people can see.
Tangible things. Simultaneously, their leader has been a sharp, consistent critic of the caretaker government's handling of daily domestic issues.
Pointing out problems.
Highlighting public concerns about the persistent rising costs of living, the perceived poor condition of existing roads, even reported shortages of medicine at the National Hospital.
So painting a picture of competence versus incompetence.
Precisely. This comprehensive strategy is clearly designed to portray the HRPP as the party of proven delivery, stability, practical solutions. A stark contrast to the perceived instability and internal squabbling of their opponents.
Which raises that important question for the electorate, doesn't it?
It does. In the face of recent political turmoil and economic pressures, can a populist economic promise and a legacy of development effectively overshadow years of governance controversies?
Will people forget the past issues if offered cash now?
The HRPP is explicitly banking on voters' immediate economic concerns, outweighing abstract principles of constitutional governance. It's a classic political strategy, seen everywhere, but maybe with particular resonance in small island economies where daily struggles are often so acutely felt.
Now let's turn our attention to the disruptor, the original Fast Party, now under the sole leadership of its founder.
Yeah, the party that caused the disruption, now facing its own.
They face an incredibly unique, complex challenge. Contesting an election against their own former leader and prime minister, who now leads a rival party. That's got to be awkward.
Awkward is an understatement. To understand the Fast Party's current strategy, we really need to recall its origins.
Okay, remind us.
It was founded back in 2020, a movement of principle born directly from its founders' vehement opposition to certain controversial land and titles bills introduced by the then HRPP government.
Right, that was the spark.
Its foundational platform was built on clear pillars: anti-corruption, Christian democratic values, social conservatism, and a commitment to decentralizing government services to the village level, empowering local communities.
That anti-establishment identity was key to their 2021 win.
Crucial. So, in the turbulent wake of this recent internal split, the Fast Party's strategy seems to be an attempt to reclaim and re-emphasize that original identity.
Trying to get back to their roots.
As the authentic vehicle for the change voters demanded in 2021, their leader and his loyal supporters are actively portraying themselves as the true guardians of the original movement's principles.
How are they framing the split?
Framing the departure of the Prime Minister and her cabinet as a necessary purification, a weeding out of those who deviated from the core mission.
Purification. Interesting term.
This narrative is evident in public statements. The party chairman, for instance, explicitly demanded that his former colleagues in the new SUP party focus on developing their own distinct manifesto instead of, quote, mocking the platform they once jointly championed.
So basically accusing them of stealing their ideas while betraying the cause.
That seems to be the subtext. It's really a battle for the very soul of the 2021 political revolution.
However,
Yeah.
And this is a huge however.
A massive, however, this is where the stakes are amplified dramatically.
Mm.
A massive shadow of uncertainty hangs over this party, embodied by what analysts are calling the Lawley variable.
The Lawley variable. Explain that.
The party leader, the founder himself, is currently facing those serious criminal charges we mentioned earlier, conspiracy, fabricating evidence.
Right, the charges that led to the initial split.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Court proceedings related to these charges had actually commenced just before the government's collapse, adding this layer of legal jeopardy to the political crisis.
So the court case is ongoing.
Yes. And under Samoan electoral law, individuals convicted of a crime within the previous 8 years are explicitly rendered ineligible to stand as candidates in a general election.
Ineligible. So if he's convicted.
A conviction would therefore effectively decapitate the Fast Party on the very eve of the election, throwing its entire campaign and its considerable 20-member parliamentary bloc into unprecedented chaos.
Decapitate the party. Wow. So imagine the strategic nightmare.
It's immense.
Running an entire national election campaign, all the logistics, the messaging, knowing your entire leadership structure, your candidate eligibility, could just evaporate based on a court verdict.
It's extraordinary.
You, the listener, can certainly appreciate how this creates a unique and profound level of political tension and uncertainty for this party. Their future is literally dependent on judicial outcomes.
But conversely, and this is the flip side of the coin,
What if he's acquitted?
an acquittal would be an absolutely monumental political victory for the leader. He'd emerge from the court case not just legally cleared, but politically vindicated,
Yeah.
significantly strengthened.
A martyr figure, almost.
His supporters would undoubtedly frame the entire prosecution as a failed political attack, a politically motivated persecution, maybe even, as you say, a divine vindication of his leadership and the party's mission.
That narrative could be powerful.
Hugely powerful. If successful, it could generate a massive surge of momentum for FAST, potentially cementing his status as a formidable candidate for prime minister. This single legal outcome, it's arguably the most critical and uncertain factor determining the ultimate shape and outcome of this entire election.
A huge question mark hanging over everything.
Absolutely.
Okay, next, we have the incumbent reimagined, the caretaker prime minister.
Samoa's first female head of government.
She now enters the 2025 campaign at the helm of a brand new political party, the Samoa Uniting Party, or SUP.
SUP, okay.
This new party, registered just before the election call, May 30th, 2025, it was swiftly created as the political vehicle for her and those 14 cabinet ministers who broke away from the original FAST party during the crisis.
So the core of the former cabinet.
Exactly. Formally launched on June 5th, 2025, it positions itself as the bloc of incumbent responsible leadership.
Okay, so what's their platform built on?
Well, the SUP's platform is built squarely upon the record and the principles that have characterized the prime minister's, well, tumultuous tenure.
Tumultuous is right.
Her leadership has been consistently defined by a steadfast, unwavering commitment to upholding the rule of law and constitutional due process.
A principle she cited in the split.
Principles she has repeatedly invoked as central to her political actions, both during the 2021 constitutional crisis and this recent internal political fracturing of 2025.
So consistency on rule of law is the message.
That seems to be the core. On the international stage, she's notably pursued a more cautious, balanced foreign policy, particularly in managing Samoa's significant debt obligations to China.
That's a big issue, the China debt.
And she's emerged as a prominent, highly respected voice advocating for global action on climate change, an issue she consistently frames as existential for Samoa.
Right, she's been very visible on climate.
Domestically, her party's forthcoming manifesto is expected to contain robust, detailed proposals for improving children's education, signaling a focus on long-term human capital development.
Okay, so education, climate, rule of law, cautious foreign policy.
The SUP's core strategic aim seems to be presenting itself as the embodiment of stable, responsible, law-abiding governance, a sober, principled alternative to both the HRPP's controversial past and the recent internal turmoil that engulfed her former party.
A safe pair of hands narrative.
But there's always a but. The prime minister and her newly formed party face a significant, undeniable challenge.
The fact that her government collapsed.
Exactly. The very political crisis that led to SUP's formation has, according to various analysts and, public sentiment, greatly tarnished and deeply dented her political image.
It's hard to campaign on stability when you just presided over instability.
Having presided over the collapse of her own government, Her campaign on a platform of stability and responsible governance presents a difficult uphill battle. Voters might well ask, how can someone who oversaw such a dramatic breakdown promise stability now?
And this raises that truly important question. How effectively can a leader who has visibly presided over the collapse of her own government successfully campaign on a platform of stability and principled governance?
It's a tough sell.
It demands a particularly powerful, convincing narrative of principled action. Her ability to articulate that the crisis wasn't a failure of her leadership, but rather a necessary, courageous stand on core principles.
Right, that the split was about principle.
And that her continued leadership remains the nation's best hope for a stable, law-abiding future that will be absolutely pivotal to her success. It's a huge test of public trust and her ability to redefine the narrative of recent events.
Beyond these three main blocks vying for dominance, we also have the wider field, several smaller parties contesting the election.
The potential spoilers or kingmakers.
Exactly. While they're generally considered unlikely to win a significant number of seats outright, their presence is nonetheless crucial. They could prove decisive as spoilers, drawing votes away from the main contenders.
Or, more critically, as kingmakers, in that highly probable scenario of a hung parliament.
Their votes could very well determine who ultimately forms the next government.
Who are the main ones in this wider field?
Well, the most prominent is the newly formed Samoa Labor Party, established just in June 2025.
Very new then.
Very new. This party represents a splinter group of disaffected former HRPP members. They broke away, reportedly, claiming the HRPP had pre-selected candidates in certain districts without proper consultation or internal democracy.
So internal HRPP issues spawning a new party.
Seems so. This new party launched its campaign with a respectable 14 candidates, running on a platform broadly focused on increasing incomes for Samoans, suggesting an appeal to economic grievances perhaps from a different angle than the HRPP CLA plan.
Okay, another economic focus.
Then you have other registered parties. The Samoa National Democratic Party, SNDP.
SNDP, they've been around a while, haven't they?
They have. Historically focused on customary land rights, advocating for overseas voting rights, and the Constitution Democracy Republic Party, CDRP.
Right.
The very presence of these minor parties, even with limited individual appeal, significantly adds another layer of complexity, unpredictability to the electoral mathematics.
Especially if it's close.
Exactly. In a closely contested multi-party election, even a few percentage points of the vote, or just a handful of elected members, can hold the balance of power, making these smaller players potentially disproportionately influential.
The kingmaker role.
And this brings us to what we're calling the family feud dynamic of this entire election.
Yeah, you mentioned this earlier.
This contest is, really at its heart, an internecine conflict among Samoa's political elite. What is truly striking, maybe uniquely Samoan about this election, is that nearly all the main players are, in a sense, graduates of the same political institution, the HRPP.
It's incredible, really.
The HRPP's longtime leader, the current caretaker prime minister who served as his deputy for years before her eventual defection.
Right. They were allies for a long time.
And the founder of the original FAST Party, who's also a prominent HRPP MP before his own expulsion.
All came from the same place.
They all share this common political background. Even the new Samoa Labor Party, as we just heard, is essentially an HRPP offshoot.
This deep shared history fundamentally transforms the election, doesn't it?
It has to.
It moves it beyond just a simple policy debate into this intensely personal drama, deeply rooted in decades of shared experiences, past alliances, mentorships, perceived betrayals.
All that history bubbling up.
And in Samoa, where the traditional system of Samoa profoundly emphasizes family, village, spiritual obligations, these personal connections and local loyalties often translate directly into political allegiance.
So it's not just about the party label.
Often not. The election's outcome may hinge less on grand national platforms and more on which leader can most effectively leverage their personal networks, command respect and loyalty within their local communities.
And craft the most compelling narrative.
Exactly. A narrative of either profound betrayal or perhaps divine vindication for the voters. It's a testament to the enduring power of personal ties in Samoan politics.
Okay, so what does this all mean for you as an observer of this fascinating situation?
Yeah, how do you make sense of it?
It means that truly understanding this election isn't just about reading manifestos or policy documents. It's about delving into these deep, personal histories, these loyalties, the intricate connections between leaders,
The relationship.
and how those relationships, for better or worse, often define the real locus of power and influence in this kind of political landscape.
It adds a whole other layer.
With the key players now vividly introduced, their intertwined histories laid bare, let's dive into the battleground issues, what's truly at stake for Samoa in this high-stakes election.
Okay, the big issues.
Where do we start?
Well, the state of the economy and that persistent rising cost of living have unequivocally emerged as central defining issues in this campaign.
The economy, number one concern for many.
It seems so. And it's on this front that the HRPP has made its boldest, most direct strategic move to regain public favor.
That's absolutely right. The HRPP's entire economic platform is headlined by their massive $110 million cost of living adjustment initiative,
The KLA plan.
promising that direct cash handout, $500 TALA to every resident annually. It's a clear, simple, highly appealing message, specifically designed to cut through the complexity of broader governance debates and appeal directly to immediate economic anxieties.
Cash in hand is always appealing.
The HRPP has coupled this promise with sharp, pointed criticism of the caretaker government's financial management. Their leader publicly suggesting the previous administration didn't fully comprehend the nation's true financial situation,
Casting doubt on their competence.
thereby presenting themselves as more financially prudent, more capable.
This populist approach from the HRPP stands in stark contrast to the more, let's say, conventional economic platforms of the other major parties.
How are the others approaching it?
Well, the newly formed Samoa Labor Party has also placed the economy at the forefront, running on a broad promise of increasing incomes, though maybe with less specific detail than HRPP's CLA plan.
So also economic, but maybe less direct.
Seems that way. The new party, led by the caretaker prime minister, SUP on the other hand, is expected to campaign on a platform emphasizing responsible economic stewardship.
The stability argument again.
Right. Strategic, targeted investments in key sectors, like children's education, aiming for long-term, sustainable growth rather than immediate handouts.
So that sets up a really classic electoral choice for the Samoan voter.
It really does. The promise of immediate cash relief from HRPP versus the promise of more structural, long-term economic management and stability from SUP.
And this debate is unfolding against the backdrop of an economy that's actually shown strong recovery post-COVID.
Yes, GDP growth rebounded impressively, over 9% in fiscal years 2023 and 2024.
But inflation is still a problem.
Despite the recovery, inflation remains a persistent concern, impacting daily lives. And this economic reality raises that important question. In a recovering economy, still grappling with inflation, which economic philosophy resonates more?
Immediate relief or long-term stability?
Exactly. Immediate, tangible relief that might be fiscally challenging long-term, or a commitment to long-term stability and measured growth. The choice for the electorate is stark, direct, and likely a major determinant of the outcome.
So while one significant party is actively talking about putting cash directly into your pocket, the others are really focused on the very foundations of democracy itself.
That's a key distinction.
Because for both the new SUP party, led by the caretaker PM, and the original FAST party, led by its founder, the core ideological battleground remains governance and the rule of law.
It really does.
This has truly been the defining political battleground in Samoa ever since HRPP introduced those controversial land and titles bills back in 2020. Bills many saw as undermining constitutional checks and balances.
That was the catalyst for so much of this, indeed. The caretaker prime minister and her newly formed SUP party are campaigning on a platform that is a direct continuation, a culmination of her political journey since 2020.
Her consistent theme.
Her entire premiership, even amidst the turmoil, has been consistently defined by her unwavering stand on restoring constitutional principles, ensuring due process.
The initial defection.
From her initial public defection from HRPP over those land and titles bills, to her decisive action to dismiss her former minister from her own cabinet. Her campaign narrative is one of a leader who has consistently prioritized the integrity of Samoa's democratic institutions.
Even when it came at significant personal and political cost.
Exactly.
Similarly, the original Fast Party's entire political identity is intrinsically rooted in its origins as an anti-corruption, pro-rule of law movement.
That's how they started.
Their leader and his supporters will tirelessly remind voters that their party was specifically created to fight against the very kind of executive overreach they perceived in the HRPP's actions.
Positioning themselves as the true heirs of 2021.
They're now positioning themselves as the true, uncorrupted inheritors of that 2021 mandate for change, claiming to be the authentic voice for constitutional integrity.
While the HRPP...
In stark contrast, the HRPP has largely chosen to sidestep this deep, often contentious debate.
Focusing elsewhere.
Instead, they focus squarely on their legacy of tangible infrastructure projects and their new, compelling economic promises, hoping that voters' practical, daily concerns about livelihoods will outweigh their memory of the governance controversies that led to their downfall in 2021.
A calculated gamble.
So, for you, it presents a fundamental choice. What is more paramount right now for the future direction of the nation? Immediate economic relief or the steadfast upholding of democratic principles?
A tough choice for voters. Moving beyond purely domestic issues, the 2025 election is being watched with keen interest by international powers.
Yeah, the geopolitical angle.
Its outcome could have significant ramifications for regional geopolitics. News analyses explicitly state the election has ramifications far beyond Samoa.
Why specifically?
Due to the heightened strategic competition playing out across the Pacific, between rising powers like China and traditional partners, the U.S., Australia, and New Zealand. Samoa's position, like many Pacific Island nations, is increasingly central to this geopolitical chess game.
And the key leaders offer different approaches here.
A clear contrast, yes, offering different pathways for Samoa's international engagement. The HRPP, under its longtime leader, historically maintained a very close, extensive relationship with Beijing.
Lots of Chinese investment during their time.
Significant Chinese investment in critical infrastructure roads, government buildings, port facilities. While beneficial for development, this also led to Samoa accumulating a substantial debt load to China.
Which worries some people.
A point of considerable concern for some observers and opposition politicians. Warning of potential debt crabs or loss of sovereignty. A victory for HRPP could signal a return to a more explicitly Beijing-centric foreign policy, perhaps. Continued emphasis on large-scale infrastructure.
And the caretaker prime minister?
She, on the other hand, has notably adopted a more cautious approach to Chinese engagement since taking office in 2021.
More balanced.
While her government maintained diplomatic and economic ties, evidenced by things like the joint unveiling of a logo for 50 years of diplomatic relations in March 2025, her rhetoric has consistently signaled a desire to balance Samoa's relationships.
Diversifying partners.
Emphasizing diversification, a conscious effort to avoid over-reliance on any single external power. Her focus has been on sustainable development, ensuring national sovereignty isn't compromised by aid or loans.
So a SUP victory would likely continue that cautious approach.
Likely, yes. Seeking to leverage relations with a broader array of partners. The potential foreign policy stance of a government led by the founder of the original Fast Party is less overtly articulated.
Less clear there.
But given his party's initial alignment with the current caretaker government and its stated principles, it would likely align more with the cautious, diversified approach rather than a return to HRPP's more singular focus.
It really shows how internal politics have external implications.
Absolutely. If we connect this to the bigger picture, Samoa's internal political dynamics have significant external implications. The choices made by its leaders directly influence regional power balances, the strategic interests of global players vying for influence in the Pacific.
Raising that important question.
How does a small island nation like Samoa effectively navigate and balance these competing global influences while safeguarding its national interests and sovereignty? It's a huge challenge.
And then there's an issue that transcends politics in a way. Climate change.
Yes, for Samoa, this isn't merely an environmental concern or a distant policy debate. It is an undeniable existential threat.
Existential, that's how serious it is.
To the nation's security, its people's well-being, its very survival. As a low-lying island, volcanic islands, coral reef, Samoa is already experiencing severe, tangible impacts.
Like what specifically?
Rising sea levels, accelerating coastal erosion, more frequent and intense tropical cyclones, changes in rainfall threatening agriculture, water security. The list goes on.
It's happening now.
This profound national vulnerability has actually propelled Samoa to a position of remarkable global leadership on climate change.
As chair of AOSIS.
Exactly. As the current chair of the Alliance of Small Island States, AOSIS, Samoa is a leading, powerful voice in international climate negotiations.
Pushing for more action.
Its role has been pivotal in advocating for far more ambitious global emissions reduction targets from major industrial nations, and for significantly greater financial support for vulnerable nations on the front lines.
Calling for climate justice.
Insistently. Samoa's representative, as AOSIS chair, has consistently called for climate justice, urging developed nations not just to meet existing financial commitments, but establish a new, robust, collective quantified goal on climate finance, recognizing that adaptation and loss and damage funding are critical for survival.
And domestically, Samoa's ambitions are high too.
Equally ambitious, the National Climate Change Policy for 2020-2030 sets a pioneering target: 100% renewable electricity by 2025.
Wow, that's very soon.
It demands substantial investment, policy dedication. The caretaker prime minister has effectively leveraged Samoa's global leadership on this issue to enhance its international standing, consistently urging larger powers to take more significant, urgent action.
Does this give her an edge?
Well, while all major parties are generally expected to remain committed to the national climate agenda, it is a matter of national survival, after all.
Right.
Her established, highly visible role as a global climate advocate certainly gives her and her new SUP party a unique, compelling standing on this critical issue.
So for you, the listener, this connection between global imperatives and local elections.
It emphasizes how deeply interconnected universal challenges like climate change are to the democratic choices made at the national level, especially in vulnerable nations on the front lines. It's a reminder that domestic politics can have truly global consequences.
Now let's turn our attention to the very mechanics of democracy itself in this upcoming election.
The process, yeah. This is crucial.
Because the integrity, fairness, and smooth execution of this 2025 election are under intense scrutiny, due to a confluence of significant logistical challenges, a severely compressed timeline, and several unresolved issues around voter registration.
The Electoral Commission is under huge pressure.
The Office of the Electoral Commission, OEC, the body responsible for organizing the vote, they're facing immense pressure to deliver a credible, transparent election under incredibly difficult, rapidly evolving circumstances.
That sudden snap election call certainly placed the OEC in a profoundly precarious, challenging position.
Forcing them to cram months of work into weeks.
Condensing months of meticulously planned preparation into a mere matter of weeks. Recognizing the sheer scale of this daunting task, the Electoral Commissioner himself took the extraordinary step of seeking judicial intervention.
He went to court.
Submitted a formal affidavit to the Supreme Court, requesting a 4-month extension to adequately prepare for the polls.
What was his argument?
Arguing this extension wasn't a matter of convenience, but a necessary measure to preserve the integrity of the democratic process itself. He warned that proceeding without adequate time would lead to a rushed and potentially flawed election.
Flawed how?
Could discourage qualified candidates, disenfranchise voters, significantly increase the likelihood of legal disputes, challenges to the outcome.
So, really undermining the whole process.
That was his fear.
To put this into perspective for you, imagine having to organize a complex national election, updating voter rolls, registering new voters, handling nominations, printing ballots, setting up polling stations, training staff, all in just a few weeks.
It's a monumental task.
That's precisely the challenge the OEC is facing. The Supreme Court, however,
Denied the request. Yeah.
rigorously upholding the constitutional mandate for an election within 3 months of Parliament's dissolution.
So the timeline stands.
This judicial decision has forced the OEC to proceed on this incredibly accelerated high-pressure schedule. Parliament dissolved June 3rd, writ issued June 10th, voter registration closes July 4th, Election Day, August 29th.
That is incredibly tight.
An incredibly tight turnaround for such a complex, vital democratic process. And the immense challenges faced by the Electoral Commission directly impact the perceived legitimacy of the outcome for every single voter.
And perhaps the most significant pressing challenge facing the OEC is that voter registration issue.
The biometric system.
Especially as the Commission is mid-transition to a new electoral roll management system requiring biometric data, fingerprints, photographs from every single voter.
And that wasn't finished.
Far from complete when the snap election was called. In late May, reports indicated only 52% of eligible voters had completed the new biometric registration.
Only half.
By mid-June, that figure had only risen to about 60%. Just over 72,000 registrations completed out of an estimated 117,000 eligible voters.
Leaving a huge number still to register.
A staggering 44,000-plus people needing to register before that critical July 4th deadline, placing immense pressure on the system.
Are people turning up?
Despite the rush, the technical hurdles, the OEC reports citizens have been turning up in droves, often necessitating staff to work late into the night to process queues, highlighting both public eagerness to participate and the systemic strain.
And this is where it gets truly interesting, and for many, deeply controversial.
The diaspora issue.
There's a critical aspect of the electoral process that effectively disenfranchises a large, politically influential segment. The diaspora.
Samoans living overseas.
A bill that would have enabled overseas voting, unfortunately not passed before Parliament dissolved.
So no overseas voting.
Under the current Electoral Act 2019, all votes must be cast in person in Samoa.
In person only.
While citizens abroad can initiate registration online, they are legally required to physically return to Samoa to provide biometric data to complete registration and subsequently to cast their ballot.
That's a huge barrier.
Yeah.
Expensive, time-consuming.
As of mid-June, only a paltry 10 overseas individuals had managed to fully complete this arduous process.
Only 10 out of thousands.
This significant barrier effectively excludes thousands, maybe tens of thousands, of politically engaged Samoans living in New Zealand, Australia, the U.S.
Many of whom remain deeply connected.
Deeply connected, invested in home politics, often a source of financial remittances, political discourse.
What's truly fascinating here, and indeed concerning, is how seemingly technical details, voter registration logistics, lack of overseas voting, can have such a profound, far-reaching political impact.
Yeah.
Shaping who gets to participate.
Yeah.
The confluence of these factors, a rushed timeline the OEC warned was inadequate, the complexity of a new, incomplete biometric system, significantly incomplete rolls weeks before the deadline, wholesale exclusion of the vast engaged diaspora. It creates fertile ground for preemptive challenges to the election's legitimacy.
Raising that really important question for any democracy.
When significant portions of the electorate are effectively excluded, intentionally or inadvertently, how does that impact the perceived fairness, the ultimate legitimacy of the democratic process? Especially given Samoa's recent history of electoral challenges, it presents a major hurdle to a universally accepted outcome.
And this entire situation is particularly alarming given the precedent set by the 2021 election.
Yeah, that crisis looms large.
That contest, you'll recall, devolved into a months-long constitutional crisis, ultimately triggered by a highly contentious dispute over appointing a single additional female MP to meet a constitutional gender quota.
A single seat caused months of deadlock.
That past experience clearly demonstrates political actors' willingness to engage in protracted legal political battles over electoral law, even for what might seem like a minor point from outside.
And the current procedural weaknesses are, in fact, far more significant, more pervasive than those of 2021.
More ammunition for challenges.
They provide ample ammunition for any losing party, or multiple losing parties, to contest the results. This isn't just a technical problem for the OEC to manage. It is, quite frankly, a political time bomb.
A time bomb?
Threatening to prolong the very instability the snap election is intended to resolve. It significantly raises the specter of another prolonged period of uncertainty and deadlock, potentially even more complex, more damaging than the one after 2021, as the grounds for challenge are broader, more fundamental. The journey to a stable government may not end on Election Day.
So what does all of this mean for you, the keen observer of these dynamics?
What's the takeaway?
It means that even after Election Day, August 29th, the journey for Samoa might just be beginning. We could witness a protracted period of potential legal battles, prolonged uncertainty, mirroring past challenges, but potentially on an even grander, more complex scale.
A bumpy road ahead, potentially.
As Samoa heads towards its snap election, the political landscape is unequivocally more fractured, more unpredictable than at any point in its recent history.
Uncharted territory, really.
That relatively neat two-way contest of 2021, decisively replaced by this chaotic, three-cornered battle between former allies, making a clear, decisive outcome highly unlikely.
Meaning the result won't be clear on the night.
It likely won't be determined on Election Day itself, but rather in the days, maybe weeks, of intense political horse trading and coalition negotiations that are almost certain to follow.
The post-election scramble. And the fragmentation of that anti-HRPP coalition that famously won power in 2021 is the single most important dynamic shaping this 2025 election and its likely outcome.
The split vote.
The votes that were once consolidated behind the unified banner of the former fast-ruling party will now be irrevocably split between its founders faction, keeping the fast name, and the caretaker PM's new Samoa Uniting Party, SUP.
Making it hard for either to win outright.
This fundamental division of votes makes it exceedingly difficult for either of these anti-HRPP factions to achieve that crucial 26 seats needed for an outright majority in the 51-seat Legislative Assembly.
So let's explore some plausible scenarios for victory. Understanding these are based on current projections, the inherent unpredictability.
With caveats, yes. Scenario A, an HRPP plurality.
They benefit most from the split.
The primary, most obvious beneficiary of this split vote among their former opponents is the HRPP, as the most established, disciplined, unified political bloc.
With that populist economic message.
Coupled with a simple, powerful, economically populist message addressing voter anxieties, HRPP is strongly positioned to win the most seats on Election Day.
Their campaign contrasts with the others' infighting.
Their disciplined campaign tangible benefits, legacy of development, contrast sharply with the internal feuding, recent instability of their rivals. However,
But not necessarily a majority.
while they are likely to emerge as the largest single party, winning a plurality of seats isn't the same as winning an outright majority. It's highly probable that even as the leading party, HRPP will fall short of the 26 seats needed to form a government alone.
Which brings us to scenario B.
A hung parliament. This is overwhelmingly the most probable outcome of the August 29th poll.
Most likely outcome.
With the vote effectively split three ways, the stage is set for a hung parliament. No single party commands a majority on its own.
So power shifts to the smaller players.
In this scenario, the power to determine the next government shifts decisively to the minor parties and any independent candidates who win seats. Parties like the new Samoa Labor Party, even individual independent MPs.
Could find themselves as kingmaker.
Exactly. In the enviable position of kingmaker, identical to the role played by that single independent MP in 2021 whose decision to side with FAST ultimately tipped the balance.
Ending decades of HRPP rule.
This scenario would inevitably lead to a period of intense negotiations and coalition building in the days, weeks following the election,
Decided behind closed doors.
with the ultimate leadership going not necessarily to the party with most votes, but to the leader who proves the most adept political negotiator.
High potential for party switching, legal challenges too.
Extremely high potential for party switching, legal challenges, protracted political maneuvering, making for a very volatile period.
Here's where it gets truly fascinating for you, because the election might not be decided on election day itself.
The drama continues after the votes are counted.
For you, this highlights the absolutely crucial role of behind-the-scenes negotiations, alliances of convenience, the delicate art of coalition building in forming a government, especially in a fractured landscape like Samoa's.
It's a reminder that democracy is often messy.
A dynamic process that extends far beyond the ballot box.
And while a hung parliament is indeed the most probable scenario, there is that one major variable with the power to dramatically alter the entire electoral calculus.
The sword of Damocles.
The outcome of the criminal proceedings against the founder of the original FAST Party. His legal fate represents, quite literally, a sword of Damocles hanging over his party and arguably the whole election.
The verdict could change everything.
The verdict in his case has the potential to set Samoa's political future on one of two very different, equally impactful paths.
Path 1. If he is convicted.
If convicted, it would render him ineligible to contest the election under Samoan law, effectively decapitating his party at its most critical, vulnerable moment.
Leaving his bloc leaderless.
The considerable 20-member parliamentary bloc he commands would be leaderless, highly vulnerable to fragmentation. In such a scenario, both their voters, potentially even their elected MPs, could be forced to shift allegiance.
Either pre-election or post-election.
In the final weeks of the campaign, or more likely in the frenetic post-election negotiations, HRPP and the new SUP party would be the most likely beneficiaries of this collapse.
So a conviction could actually lead to a clear result.
It could dramatically create a clearer path to an outright majority for one of them, potentially averting the complexities of a hung parliament.
Okay, path 2. If he is acquitted.
If acquitted, it would represent nothing short of a monumental political triumph for him. He'd emerge not just legally cleared, but profoundly vindicated, immensely strengthened politically.
The failed political attack narrative.
His fervent supporters would undoubtedly frame the entire prosecution as a failed political attack, a politically motivated persecution designed to sideline him, reinforcing his image as a persecuted but divinely favored leader.
Giving fast, huge momentum.
This narrative, if it takes hold, would generate a massive surge of momentum for his party. Fast. Transforming it into an even more formidable contender to lead a new coalition government, cementing his position as a very strong candidate for prime minister.
It really raises that question.
How often do we witness a legal proceeding directly determining the fate of an entire political party, potentially the government of a sovereign nation? The outcome of this case is arguably the single most significant known unknown in this entire election, holding the power to reshape the political landscape overnight.
So synthesizing all this evidence, the intricate dynamics we've discussed,
Bringing it all together.
the most probable outcome of the 2025 Samoan general election is indeed a hung parliament.
Seems unavoidable almost.
The profound fragmentation makes a clear, decisive victory for any single party a remote possibility. While HRPP is likely the largest single party, benefiting from the split vote.
They will almost certainly fall short of securing an outright majority on their own.
Therefore, the ultimate winner will almost certainly be determined not by the popular vote on August 29th.
But in the intense post-election scramble for allegiances, coalition building, the leader who proves the most skilled, persuasive, flexible negotiator will be the one to form the next government.
Unless that court case changes everything.
The outcome of the legal case against the Fast founder remains the most significant, unpredictable variable that could fundamentally reshape this prediction.
And the combination of a likely close contested result, plus those electoral process fragilities,
The rushed timeline, incomplete registration, disenfranchised diaspora,
means the potential for a prolonged period of political and legal instability is dangerously high.
potentially even more complex, more damaging than the period after 2021, placing considerable strain on Samoa's democratic institutions.
Beyond the immediate question of who wins, who leads, the 2025 election marks a truly critical juncture for the future of governance in Samoa.
A turning point.
The next government, regardless of its ultimate political composition or leader, inherits a nation grappling with deep political personal divisions, exacerbated by years of intense turmoil, infighting.
A difficult inheritance.
Its first, arguably most difficult task will be embarking on a concerted process of national healing, diligently working towards restoring public trust in political leaders and, crucially, in the very democratic institutions underpinning national stability.
Rebuilding trust is key. Simultaneously, the new administration faces a daunting, multifaceted set of policy challenges demanding immediate attention, astute leadership.
Like what?
Expertly navigating a post-pandemic economy still facing global inflationary pressures. Making critical choices between potentially populist spending for immediate relief and the imperative of long-term fiscal discipline for sustainable growth.
The economy still central.
Continuing to champion Samoa's urgent cause on the front lines of the global climate crisis. Demanding significant diplomatic capital internationally, substantial domestic investment and resilience.
Climate action remains vital.
And finally, skillfully steering the nation through an increasingly complex, competitive geopolitical environment in the Pacific. Carefully balancing relationships with established traditional partners and emerging global players like China, ensuring Samoa's sovereignty and national interests remain paramount.
So what does this all mean for you as we look beyond Election Day? Consider the broader implications.
A bigger picture.
It means Samoa faces not just a potential change in leadership, but a monumental, multifaceted task. Healing deeply fractured political foundations, skillfully navigating complex challenges, domestic and international.
It's a testament to the resilience of the nation, but also a stark reminder of the pressures small island democracies face.
What an extensive deep dive into this intricate political landscape of Samoa.
We covered a lot of ground.
We've meticulously explored the origins of this unprecedented snap election, delved into the intense three-way battle among the parties and their towering, interconnected leaders,
Personal dynamics.
unpacked the critical issues being debated on the campaign trail, and highlighted those crucial procedural fragilities of the electoral process that loom so large over the outcome. It's a truly complex picture.
Indeed. It's a compelling story of a nation at a pivotal, uncertain moment. with profound lessons and insights that resonate far beyond its shores, offering a window into the challenges faced by democracies globally.
As Samoa stands at this critical crossroads, navigating deep divisions and uncertain future, perhaps the most profound question for you to consider isn't just who will ultimately lead,
But something deeper.
but how a nation truly recovers and rebuilds fundamental trust when its political foundations have been so deeply, so publicly shaken. What enduring lessons can be drawn from Samoa's turbulent yet resilient journey for democracies facing similar internal pressures around the world?
A question worth pondering.
For more deep dives into complex topics that help you unpack the world, one fascinating story at a time, make sure to subscribe to The Deep Dive wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode.
Thanks for joining us.
We appreciate you joining us.